This week on the Rencast, not this week because I've been incredibly inconsistent with it, but this time on the Rencast, I am talking about Sorry to Bother You, Boots Riley's theatrical feature film debut, Sorry to Bother You. This is a movie that I actually was looking forward to and have been wanting to watch for quite a while, and honestly, I thought I was going to review it at some point, but unfortunately, the movie didn't come near me at all. The movie was like, 30 or 40 miles away when it finally did come, and it was only playing at like 2 show times, so I ended up not being able to see this in theaters, but it recently came out on VOD and on demand, and so I watched it, and I really, really loved it. I expected to like the movie, considering all things about it, everything I had heard, all the early reviews, all the test screenings, the film festival praise that it was getting. I was expecting big things out of it, and it was completely different than what I expected. So when I watched the trailer, or when you do watch the trailer, it seems like it's about this guy that becomes a telemarketer, and then he gets really good at it, and then he goes up in the company and kind of loses himself and then comes back down. It seemed like a very typical, simplistic story about pride comes before the fall kind of thing, where a guy is kind of down on his luck and wants nothing more than to get rich quick. And then when he actually does get rich, he gets greedy and he loses his way. He loses everything he had and realizes near the end that he had it way better before. And so he goes back to that. And that's kind of what this is, I guess, in the most simplistic, boiled down way possible. That's what Sorry to Bother You is about. It's about our main character, whose name is escaping me right now, Cassius Green, which is definitely a self-aware name that Boots Riley gave to our friend here, our main character, Cassius Green, because the movie is pretty much all satire, which I'll talk about more later, but it makes sense that our main character is greedy, and then his name is Cassius Green. But anyway, Cassius Green and his girlfriend, Tessa Thompson, Detroit, are dating. They really like each other. And then he gets a job at this company called... Oh, no, I can't remember. Anyway, he gets a job at a company that does telemarketing, and he sucks at it. He's really bad. And then this seasoned veteran tells him that he should use his white voice. And he says, I don't know what you mean by white voice. Like, should I plug my nose and make my voice all nasally? And the guy says, no, that's not it. You got a white voice in you, like a real white person voice. And then, as the movie goes on, he becomes, Cassius Green becomes David Cross. Not, like, in person, but his voice is voiced by David Cross, who is, if you know, the never nude guy from Arrested Development, who's always wearing jean shorts. That's David Cross. So David Cross voices over our main character, who's played by Lakeith Stanfield. And so whenever he talks, when he's doing telemarketing, he's using David Cross's voice. So it's this really hilarious meta play on people being more comfortable with white people being more comfortable hearing a white person's voice. And so he gets this voice, and then he starts selling super well. And then he goes up to be a power caller, which is selling the big stuff, making the big money. And he gets up there and he realizes that he's selling essentially slave labor for a monolithic company ran by Army Hammer, which is hilarious. So he becomes this power caller, and then he kind of loses his way, obviously. He abandons his moral values, his compass, his ethics. He abandons everything that made him him, and gets super rich And yeah, from there he realizes that what he had before was better. So that's essentially the story. But if Boots Riley, as the writer and director, wasn't so creative, inventive, and interesting and hilarious, this movie probably would have fallen on its face. Because again, it is really simplistic. It's something you've seen 100,000 times already. But I think the meat of the movie is how creative it is. I think, there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of satire in the movie. There's a lot of political, social commentary here. Some of it works, and some of it really doesn't. And I can, again, talk about that more soon. But I think what really makes this movie work is the creativity. It is inventive in the way that it portrays scenes, and it's incredibly creative. I remember one scene where Cassius Green becomes a power caller, and he goes home to his house in a garage. He lives in a garage, and he lays down in bed, and he's kissing his girlfriend, and as he's doing that, the camera just holds on them, and you see his bed extend out, and his sheets go from gray to just pristine white, and the bed gets bigger, and his blankets get more upscale, and then it kind of pans out, and it shows all of his stuff changing from really cheap stuff into high class luxury things. And the camera's just panning out as everything's changing around him. His TV folds out from a box TV into a flat screen, and it's a really wonderful way of showing how his life is changing without being too on the nose with it, without being, I should maybe not too on the nose because it kind of is, but it's incredibly creative. It's more than just he all of a sudden is driving a Jaguar and wearing high class suits. It's showing the audience that his life is changing all around him, and it's really not changing him all that much at first, because everything changes, and him and his girlfriend are still there. They still love each other. But his life is going to change. And as this is happening, as he becomes a power caller, the people downstairs doing the sort of routine, mundane calls that aren't paying them very much are trying to overthrow the company, or they're staging a coup, kind of. They form a union and say that they want to get paid more or they will stop working. And so every day they form a picket line out front of the company and try to stop power callers from coming in so that they can get better pay. And as Cassius Green becomes a power caller, he was part of the union, and he completely abandons it because he wants money. And so there's these great sequences where this picket line is saying, we want money, we want more money, and the SWAT team just starts huddling around power callers, and then they move into the building, and they just clobber anyone in their way. They shove people on the grounds, they hit them with batons, they throw them around, and it's pretty hilarious, but at the same time it's pretty dark. And this is sort of some of the first instances of satire, obviously not the first, but some of the most blatant stuff. Because there's also a TV show going on in the universe where there's 3 channels in this universe. One is the news, which is almost constantly just playing horrible to watch things that nobody wants to see because they're hard to watch, but real. And then there's a weird meme channel, and then there's a channel called I'll beat the crap out of you or something like that. I can't remember now. And the whole show's premise is that a person volunteers to come in and somebody to just beat him up, beat him to a pulp. And it's hilarious. Apparently, they say in the universe, it's their top show. It gets 150 million views, and it sort of parallels this whole picket line and the power callers behind the SWAT team just plowing through them, because it's hilarious to watch, but it's also really dark and grim. And Boots Riley has such a great sense of humor about things, but at the same time he's showing that there is a lot of really bad things happening in the world that are sort of being normalized. And I think that's what he's going for with the TV show, where it's like somebody's literally, you just watch somebody get beat to a pulp, and it's the most popular show on TV. And I think that's sort of what Boots Riley is trying to say here, is that our culture is one to normalize really horrific things that probably shouldn't be normalized. And the TV show does a great job of portraying that. And the picket line that the SWAT officers just plow through, I think, does a great job of portraying that as well. And there's a great scene when the police officers are plowing through this line. A lady throws a Coke can and hits Cassius Green in the forehead. And he's wearing a bandage around his head for, like, literally the rest of the movie. And as the movie's going along, you see this lady that hit him with a Coke can become sort of like a cultural icon. She, like, gets her own show. She, like, he becomes a Halloween costume where you can buy his hair, his wig, with, like, a Coke bottle that's attached to it. So you see, like, little kids running around with his hair and the Coke bottle can in his hair. And she goes on TV and talks about why she did it, and then there's this channel that are showing how to do a DIY version of that Halloween costume. And it's stuff like this that makes the movie work for me, because again, it is really simplistic, but as it's cutting in between this simple story and stuff like this, where it's kind of portraying the culture and how his life is both being affected by and affecting the culture. And there's a point when, like, an entire line of children is walking by this restaurant he's in that are all wearing his hair with a Coke bottle. And he's like, this is what I'm talking about. This is crazy. And it's again, I think Boots Riley's saying that we're normalizing things that maybe shouldn't be normalized, because, you know, if you make that into a meme, if you make that into a Halloween costume, then you're more likely to have something like that happen on a more regular basis, where people are being praised for hurting others when that really should not be the case. It's literally assault. It's illegal. But because it's normal, because it's funny, then people don't care as much. And that's the more subtle satire that I think really works here. The stuff that doesn't really work that much is sort of the really obvious, on the nose, like, political stuff, because as Cassius Green is rising in the company, obviously he gets to be a power caller, and then he's calling, like, big huge companies and selling them slave labor through a monolithic company. And the company's head is run by Armie Hammer, and he's, like, developing this is a big spoiler, so if you haven't seen the movie, I would recommend watching the movie before listening to this. So spoilers ahead. Armie Hammer is developing a new breed of human. It's a horse-human hybrid, and he's developing them to help with the workload and get more productivity and efficiency out of humans without using as much money. And he tells Cassius Green that he will pay him like $100 million to turn himself into a horse, go into the work, like infiltrate the horse culture, and then once the horse culture realizes that they have it really bad, they'll want to rise up, and then Cassius Green can be a corporate controlled Martin Luther King Jr. horse equivalent, I think is how they put it in the movie. And a lot of that stuff is really on the nose, because it's trying, I feel like it's trying to satirize politics and our corporate culture, but it does it in a way that's funny, at least, and sort of creative with the horse people. That's kind of funny. But the message that Boots Riley is trying to convey is incredibly obvious, and even the stuff with Cassius Green just rising in the company and then realizing he had it better before. All of that stuff is really obvious and really on the nose. And it's that stuff in the movie that I kind of wished was either toned down a little bit or just kind of not present. Again, Boots Riley makes it fun and creative and inventive, which makes it work more than most movies. But still, I found myself in multiple scenes just saying, okay, I get it, let's move on. Okay, I get it, let's move on. And so that's probably my biggest issue with it, is just there's a ton of satire in this movie. Some works and some really doesn't. There's some great stuff with, like, Cassius Green always has this picture of his dad with him, and periodically throughout the movie he'll kind of look over at it, and depending on Cassius Green's decisions and mental state, the picture changes, which I thought was really great. So, like, he becomes a power caller and he's selling the slave labor, and he'll look over at the picture and his dad is like face palming, like, what are you doing, son? And then at the very end, when he makes all the right decisions and saves the horse people, the picture is like jumping for joy. So there's stuff like that and the TV show that really work with the movie. And then there's stuff like the Armie Hammer stuff that I don't think works, because even Cassius Green, when he leaves the company, he leaks that Armie Hammer is creating these horse people, and it works to Armie Hammer's benefit. Like, his stock rises incredibly high, and everyone just sees the horse people as like a genetic marvel rather than the horrifying, unethical, disturbing thing that it really is. So it's really obvious what he's going for with all of that stuff, and I don't particularly like that stuff. But overall, I think this movie is really great. I think Lakeith Stanfield is excellent as Cassius Green. Gives a really gripping performance. The first half of the movie, he's just so pathetic that you empathize with him. And then as he becomes the power caller, you root for him in a way, because you're like, he's so pathetic, he deserves this. But then he starts making all of these morally questionable decisions, and you're like, all right, man, what are you doing? What's going on? Oh, and there's this great scene when he goes to Armie Hammer party, and Armie Hammer's like, you're black, you can rap. And he's like, no, I actually can't rap at all. And he's like, no, rap. And so he gets everyone to cheer him on to rap, and he goes up on these stairs to rap, and he fails miserably at it. And it's hilarious. It's awkward, and super funny. And then he just starts saying, and I quote, I'm going to quote this so I won't get in trouble, but he just starts saying, nigga shit, over and over and over again. He says it like 15 times, and then the crowd gets super into it and is chanting it. And again, it's obvious what Boots Riley is going for there, where it's like, nobody cares about what he's actually saying. They just care about some controversial thing. And I love that. I think, again, Lakeith Stanfield really, really works in this role. He gives it his all, and he honestly gives, I think, an Oscar-worthy performance. He's excellent. Tessa Thompson as the art gallery extremist. I don't know how to phrase her. She's an artist, but she does like performance art. She's great in the movie. Terry Crews is in it as Cassius Green's uncle, and he doesn't really do that much, but it's fun to see him. Danny Glover is in it. Stephen Yeun, whatever. David Cross, Patton Oswalt, Lily James are all voices in the movie. And I think everyone really does a great job, and I think mainly it's because I think Boots Riley just was so passionate about the material that it sort of leaked down throughout the cast. And it seems like everyone is really passionate about it, and everyone seemed to really love working on it. And it really translates through the screen to the audience. Watching these characters, watching these actors really give it their all and really dive into the character, it makes watching the movie a lot more entertaining. There's so much energy to this movie. There's so much passion in this movie that it makes it almost automatically compelling and riveting in a certain extent. And I really loved everyone in the movie, and I liked most, if not all, of the characters in this movie. They all serve a very distinct purpose in the movie. There isn't anybody in the movie that feels expendable. Everyone serves some kind of purpose to either the story, to the political and social commentary, and to the main character. So I think Boots Riley has written and directed one of the more interesting, compelling, entertaining movies of this year, and he has managed to say a lot with this movie and only minorly trip up here and there. I think not only is some of the political commentary pretty on the nose, but I think because he's an amateur director, there is some scenes that are a little flat as far as cinematography goes. There's some scenes that are a little boring to look at, and I think that just kind of comes with the territory of being new to this. So it doesn't hurt that movie all that much, and I think there is some pacing issues near the end. I think it could have ended a little bit sooner than it did, but other than that, I absolutely love this movie. I think it's one of my favorite movies of the year. I had an absolute blast watching it, and even if you don't care about the political stuff in the movie, even if you go into this movie not wanting to use your brain that much or think that much, what Boots Riley has created is something that I think works both for people that want to think about it and people that don't, because the political stuff is interesting, but the story and the creativity of it is almost more interesting. Just watching how Boots Riley constructs scenes, how he feeds the audience information, how the story progresses, even though the actual story is super simplistic, it takes surprising turns in how it tells its story. So this is one of those movies that is less about the destination and more about the journey to get there, and I would highly recommend it. I had a great time with it, and I'm definitely going to buy this on Blu-ray as soon as possible. Don't know why I haven't yet, but I'm going to. So yeah, that's it. That's Sorry to Bother You. I think from now on, I'm not going to say what movie I want to talk about, because I often find myself, when I'm actually in front of the microphone, not wanting to do that a lot of times. Sometimes I do, but a lot of times I'll see something or watch a series in between one podcast to the next and end up wanting to talk about that instead, which happened with this movie. So I think I'm just going to talk about whatever I want, whenever I want, and post this whenever I want. So yeah, that's it. That's Sorry to Bother You. Next time I'll have something different. So that's it. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.